Hi, my name is Alex, and in today's video, I am going to show you how to make this. Oops, I meant this. Nope, not that one either. One second. I think I got it, alright? We're going to make this. Perfect. This is exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to take this off and put my glasses on so I can see. Yep, so this is what we're going to be making in today's video, and I'm going to show you step by step how I turned a spool of plastic and some extra materials into this beautiful helmet. So before we can do anything, the first thing that we need to do is we need to get on the computer and we need to get some files so that we can 3D print this. So I'll see you there.
Okay guys, so we're at the computer now and there are a few things that I want to show you, but I do want to apologize up front. So this channel is brand new and there's definitely still some work that it needs. I need to upgrade my computer, my camera, my microphone, my audio. So forgive me for any of those bumps. I know that it could be a little bit of a higher quality, but we're just at the beginning part of the the slow growing part of the channel, and so those are just some of the pains that you got to work through, the growing pains. And so please bear with me, but I do think that there is some valuable information here that I can share with you, and I hope you stay tuned through this video and that you learn something. So first of all, before you can 3D print something, you need a file. So assuming you're not going to make a file, you can go to any number of sites. Thingiverse is one of the more popular ones, and you can look up a Mandalorian helmet. This is the one that I printed out. So this is by the Broken Nerd 83. It's a really good file. It worked really well for me. It's broken up. If you got a big enough printer to print it in one piece, then it's broken up perfectly for you with the earpieces, the back vent, and then the helmet there. And so there's a file. If you don't like that file and you want to use a different file, awesome. But this is what we're going to be using in Cura. So now we're going to hop over to Cura and I'm going to show you some of the settings that I've used specifically for this helmet. Okay, so here we are in Cura, and I already have the helmet on the build plate. This is using my Ender 3 Max Neo, which as you can see is clearly big enough to slice an entire Mandalorian helmet and print an entire Mandalorian helmet. If you have a smaller printer, unfortunately you're going to have to chop this up, and that's a video for a completely different day on how to print big props on small printers, because you can do it. The suit behind me, that helmet was made with a small printer that couldn't do that in one go, but different video for a different day. Anyways, this is what it'll look like. You need to adjust it around a little bit. I want to lay it down as flat as possible, so I've already went ahead and done that and just laid this out as flat as possible. But the red that you're seeing in this program in Cura, that's everything that's going to need supports. And this is something that you're going to learn the more you play around with Cura. But look at this. That right there under the main dome, that's nasty. We do not want that. For grins and giggles, I'm going to show you what happens when we slice this, okay? So let's go ahead and slice this file and let's see just how much time it would take to print that and how much supports we're going to end up using. All right, so after slicing it, we're looking at 6 days, 2 hours, and 21 minutes. It's going to use 986 grams of filament, almost an entire roll of filament just for this. That does not include the ears and the back vent. And it's going to cost roughly $24. If we look at the information here, we can see what exactly is being used, how much time is going to be spent, and how much filament is going to be spent on the different parts. Support is going to be 27 hours, so more than a day, and 19% of the filament will be going to supports. Then if you go into preview, we're going to see exactly what this looks like. Here we go. So if you've done a lot of 3D printing, you know what you're looking at here. These are, the blue is going to be anything that is supports, the supports that we're putting in here. And so the front's not bad. This visor needs that support, that needs to be there, because this visor will not survive without something to support it. But the problem is when, see if I can do this without my computer freaking out. Yeah, look at that. Look at all of that chunky goodness. This right here is an entire support, just a chunk of support. So we can bring this preview down and we can see kind of just a layer by layer view, and we can see what's going on. So if we look in here, look at that. Just look at that. That is a lot of support. And the crazy thing is the default supports density is it's something like 20% on Cura. I think it's 20. And so I dropped this down to 4%. You can really, most of the time, use 2 to 4% and it'll be fine because this would be even thicker. But this is nuts. We don't want all of that. So if we go back to prepare and there are a lot of settings that I can adjust. I'm not going to adjust all of them. One of the important ones that you're going to want to adjust here is your overhang angle in your supports. I'm going to change this to 75. And right away, you're going to notice that red is a whole lot smaller. So it literally just wants a little bit up here. But play around with this. But I know it can be done. I have done it. I have seen other people do it. You don't even need that support. So what you're going to do is you are going to use what's called a support blocker here. And if you don't have support blocker, you just need to go into your settings in Cura and go to the store, and it's a free extension. You just need to make sure you install that extension. And then you just stick the support block in there. And then you want to scale that support block up so that it covers all of that red. And essentially, this is just going to tell the computer, it's going to tell my printer that I don't want that red printed. And it'll leave the other supports because I need these supports, but it will cancel out that support there. And I think we've covered it all. So let's try slicing this again and see what happens this time around. All right, so now, after we made those adjustments, we're looking at 4 days, 12 hours, and 23 minutes. So basically 2.5 days that we shaved off of this thing, I think, right? Yeah, something like that. Crazy. We're looking at like $6 cheaper than we were before, 200 less grams to make this. Yeah, this is more what you want. And so when we preview this, we're going to see again that we still have our supports. Supports are literally only 5% now instead of what was it, like 19%. Supports are going to take 5 hours and 48 minutes to print instead of it being 27 plus hours to print. So this is going to be using a lot less materials. And if you want to use more materials, then go for it. But that's one of the things that you want to play with the most while you're doing this is you're wanting to find the most effective way to do something to make this, to orient it so that you're not wasting material and you're not wasting time. Yeah, look, see? Nothing in the middle. Just enough support to support the eyes. That's all we need. So adjusting that overhang angle and then blocking out that support made a world of a difference. I'm super happy with this. I would send it like this. So let's move on to the ears and the back grill, and that's super simple. All right, so now we're looking at the ear, and this is the bottom part of the ear. What I want to do is I want to do a couple of things. One, I want to change it so that it is lined up horizontally with the y-axis. Now this doesn't necessarily matter too much if you're depending on the kind of printer you're using. I have two bed slingers, and so that means it's going to move back and forth on the x-axis. The bed is going to move that, and then to go left to right on the y-axis, it's actually going to be the nozzle going back and forth. And so with the bed swinging back and forth with an item like this, you're more likely to knock it over. And so trying to orient it with the y-axis is always the best thing to do. And then the other thing that you'll notice that I did is I did set this standing upright. You would think that I would set it down like this, but if you can stand up a print, do it. Because if you slice this and looked at it, I mean, I'll slice this while we're talking and we can take a look at it and whatnot. But what ends up happening is the top layers of this ends up looking really bad. I don't care for it at all. So it's been recommended to me, and I have found this to be true, that if you can stand it up, you want to stand it up. It's not the end of the world, but so this isn't a long print. But if we look at this preview, yeah, look at that. That's not what we want. That's what the top of it's going to look like. Like that is what it's going to look like. There's these weird layers. I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. 3 hours, 12 minutes, 22 grams. That's not too. That's not the end of the world. But flipping this thing upright, trying to give it the best chance of succeeding. That looks good. Let's slice this and see what happens instead. There you go. 2 hours, 53 minutes, 24 grams. A little bit less time. When you're doing something like this, it might not be a bad idea, depending on how tall it is, to change your print speed to go to a slower print speed. Because the biggest thing that you don't want is you just don't want to wobble. Okay, you don't want this to wobble around, otherwise that you'll get weird layer shifts and it could mess up in the middle of your print. But that right there, that's a super simple print. I don't think you'll have any problem with that at all. Okay, and here's the top of the ear, and you can orient it just like this. You'll need to use minimal support. It's not that big of a deal. Now, I printed this two different ways. My first one printed just fine like this, but then my second one had some issues for whatever reason. And so if you have any issues, just orient it differently, you know? I oriented it like that, and that works just fine too. But I would suggest, if you're able to, start with it like this, because that's better. Now I need to adjust that down just a little bit more. Something like that. That's a little bit better. So that's how I'd run it. And then the back grill. Okay, and there is the back grill. This is going to be the part that's going to go on the back of the helmet. It's leaning forward just a little bit, so I'm going to lean it back. Use a little bit of support, so it's not the end of the world. Yeah, this should be just fine. I'd print it like that. Yep. So try it. If it doesn't work, set it on its side. Just do your best to not set it on its back. You just don't want to do that. You don't want to ruin the details on this, because my philosophy is I want the printers to do the majority of the work for me. If I can take an extra hour and let the printer do that extra work so that I don't have to then put in 3 hours of sanding to correct something wonky, then I want the machine to be doing that work for me. So play around with it. You'll figure it out the more you play with it. But Mando helmets are actually fairly simple to orient and print. They're pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot of major complicated twisting or tweaking. So anyways, so that's it for the computer side. We've got everything sliced up and ready to go. Let's throw it on the printer, and let's see what happens when we print it.
Okay, awesome. So it printed beautifully, smooth, and it fits like a glove. My nose is not popping out, so this is a really good size. I didn't really do too much to scale it. I literally just printed it at 100% scale and went for it. I mean, it's not going to be for me anyway, so it's not really too much purpose in scaling at 100% to my size. But I just took a risk and I went for it, and it came out beautifully. So now, let me flip my camera. So now comes the fun part: the sanding, the finishing, the everything. So we're gonna sand this bad boy down, and here's the earpieces and the rear vent. Those will get sanded as well. The first step before you do any of this is to remove your supports. I have done most of that. You can see a little bit right here around the edges that will probably need a little bit of attention. But you remove your supports as best you can. Then you'll take something like, I've got a whole handful of files. I just use these guys. Sometimes you need to use the clippers that you get with your Creality printers. Whatever you have at your disposal to try to get rid of as many of those details and the supports that are left over. You want to get that cleaned as much as possible, and then you start sanding. And the sanding, you want to start at a lower grit and work your way up. So you can vary. There's really kind of just everybody has their own method to it. I'm going to be starting tonight with an 80 grit, and then work my way up with a power sander with an 80 grit to a 120 grit, and then probably eventually 240. I don't know if we'll even get to the 320. I kind of doubt it. And then I have a variety of sandpaper to use by hand. So we'll get to that for the small nooks and crannies. But I have a brand new power sander, so I'm super excited about that. Literally have not even opened it yet. So, and then we'll put it to work. So let's stop talking about it. Let's do it. Okay, so next day, this was after just the first round of sanding, and I'm really happy with how much the layer lines have been knocked off on this thing. It's still really rough and coarse, but if you look,
those layer lines are really less obvious. So I was gonna jump up from the 80 grit to the 120 grit. I might be crazy and I might jump up all the way to a 240 grit and see what happens. We're gonna play around with this because this is, again, first time playing around with this, figuring it out, dialing it in, but I'm pretty sure I can get it really smooth with that 240, and then from there I'll basically just wet sand and be good to start on the filler primer phase. So yeah, let's go back at it. Okay, so I did just hit this with a round of the 240 and it's looking really good. Again, those layer lines are, I haven't even started the filler primer stage yet, and these layer lines are definitely hard to see. If you get really close, you see some, like you can see a couple of them down here, right here and whatnot. But the 5-foot rule, you can't really see many layer lines. So I'm going to go an extra step. I might, for grins and giggles, jump all the way up to an 800 grit and see what that does with this guy. So let's try one more round of sanding with a power sander. Then it's probably time to do a little bit of hand sanding in the edges and start filler priming and sand again. Okay, so I just hit this with the 800 grit and it is awesome. Part of the sanding process is, you know, it's not always about even what you see as much as it is what you feel. Sometimes when you're trying to find out if you sanded it well. So usually after I've done a good job of sanding, after I've hit this with a round of sanding, I'm going to be feeling around, trying to see if I can feel any rough spots. And this feels really smooth and I haven't even wet sanded it yet. So you don't have to do it in the order that I'm doing it. You can start at 60 and work your way up to 200. You can start at 80 and work your way up to a 2000, whatever you want to do. But when you're doing this, you want to start at a low grit to really try to attack those layer lines and then work your way up to get it smoother and smoother. So I could go ahead and hit this with a filler primer. I think for grins and giggles, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a round of wet sanding before I do that, just to get it really smooth. And then I'm going to put on some filler primer and I'll probably have to sand that back down and do that again. But let's get this guy wet sanded and then we'll move on to the filler primer stage.